In the era of Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, it was the year 1347 when entire villages fell silent, towns were completely wiped from the map, and whole communities disappeared. Yet there was one group of people who remained unfazed. Who were these people, and how did they survive a plague that killed at least 200 million people worldwide and around 20 to 50 million in Europe? To truly understand the hidden genes of Germany, we must go back over 10,000 years towards the end of the last ice age, because that's where something interesting happened. The land that we call Germany right now was first claimed by the wandering bands of people called hunter-gatherers, Western hunter-gatherers. After glaciers finally began to retreat, Europe's icy silence developed forests, rivers, and even fertile plains. This was quite interesting to see for people of that time. In this land came the Western hunter-gatherers. They were a small band of people carrying Europe's oldest genetics. This genus is I and C1A. These people were tough as nails, as you can tell from their names. They lived in a very harsh and unpredictable environment, from hunting red deer and aurochs, fishing in rivers, and gathering plants that they could find. Their sole survival was heavily dependent on their surroundings. Since they lived for generations in low sunlight climates, it changed their DNA, giving them lighter skin to absorb more vitamin D. Even today, the pale complexion is quite common in most people in Northern Europe. Without the pale color, they wouldn't endure the dim, cold European winters. In other words, the hunter-gatherers gave Germany the genetic foundation that became the basis of every future migration. From their skeletal remains, tools, and cave, their art is still very popular to this date. However, another change was coming, and it was around 7,000 years ago from today. That's because a new revolution arrived from the south, one that would change European genetics even further. Anatolian farmers. This is Anatolia. Nowadays it is known as Turkey. From this area, 7,000 years ago, came a wave of Neolithic farmers. These people were skilled, and they brought seeds of wheat and barley, herds of domesticated animals, and pottery that was designed with beautiful art. Moreover, they carried completely new genetic signatures called the N1A and G2A. As they reached Germany, they transformed the land. While the hunter-gatherers had it harder to survive, the Anatolian farmers eliminated the need to live in a world with the uncertainties of the hunt. Instead, fields stretched everywhere, and villages were sprouting everywhere you could see. However, unlike hunter-gatherers who ultimately had a huge change in their complexion, Anatolian farmers had darker hair, broader facial features, and the capacity for a more sedentary and agricultural lifestyle. These are our ancestors who first made soil the building block of human nutrition and also laid the foundations of the German agriculture that exists today. You know Germany from its unique bread-making traditions and rural customs. The farmers were the ones who made that change. However, history is often brutal because as they came to Germany, the Western hunter-gatherers didn't like it, and both groups of people clashed. Countless battles happened, but in the end, both genetics mixed and intermarried, creating a very unique and blended population. This way, a new balance was forming while thunder rolled across the Eurasian steppes. The Yamnaya. Before we dive into the bubonic plague, we must understand what happened after the farmers and hunter-gatherers mixed. Around 5,000 years ago, the earth was full of the hooves of horses. They came from the vast Pontic-Caspian steppe and were called the Yamnaya people. These were nomadic herders who changed Europe's whole identity. The Yamnaya carried the R1b gene, which is quite widespread in Germany today. However, they bought more than just the DNA. They introduced horses, wheeled carts, and warriors that changed the power in Europe. They were tall, broad-shouldered, and different from the Anatolian farmers, who had more of a relaxed lifestyle. The sheer presence of Yamnaya was enough to reshape everything. From languages to the myths of the thunder god and sky father, everyone was terrified by the Yamnaya. Their influence was so great that even today, traces of their DNA make up a huge portion of modern German ancestry. Crazily enough, even the German language itself has the whole Indo-European tongue. But if you think Yamnaya was the end, we're only starting, because soon, their legacy would merge with another group that would evolve Germany even more. The Bell Beaker people. Almost 500 years after Yamnaya's influence, the Bell Beaker culture emerged. They used unique bell-shaped drinking vessels, but were far more than just potters. They know business and are culture connectors. Very soon their influence spread across Europe, blending with the descendants of the Yamnaya and other populations. The mix of Bell Beaker made a lot of influence in Europe, and their genetics were unique. Some had light hair and blue eyes, while others had dark hair and olive skin. The Bell Beaker people soon established trade routes and laid the early foundation of craftsmanship that later became the German identity. Then came another wave of people, and this time it was even more interesting: the Celts. Around 3,000 years ago, Celtic tribes spread into South and West Germany. They had R1b DNA along with older lineages like L2a. The Celts were masters in metalwork and ironwork specifically, and their weapons quickly started transforming both warfare and agriculture. From expensive jewelry to burial mounds and sacred groves, they were developing at a rather fast rate. Even in the Rhineland and Bavaria, the Celtic DNA is so obvious to this date. Those people have darker hair and eyes, which reflects on the Celts. Moreover, they have traditions like the Walpurgis Night and folk festivals that are heavily inspired by their Celtic roots. However, the Celts' dominance was short-lived because a new wave of people was on their way, and while they made a lot of advancements, they were quite brutal. The Romans came around 2,000 years ago. Crossing the Alps, they pushed into Germany. Thanks to the Romans, we have beautiful cities like Cologne and roads that are still working to this date. Amongst them, the Romans also built vineyards along the Rhine that still provide widely popular wines. When we look at their DNA, the Romans had the Mediterranean DNA like J2 and E1b1b, adding olive skin tones and darker features to the German gene pool. If you go to the Rhine Valley today, you can still see their influence. However, even the biggest empire of that time, Rome, crumbled, and it was the Franks who then filled their place. The Franks were carrying the R1b lineages that emerged as quite powerful in Western Germany. They united different tribes, created kingdoms, and also laid the foundation of what would become the Holy Roman Empire. The Franks were the ones who built the very concept of the Germanic identity. Even to this date, towns, surnames, and cultural traditions have their mark. The Western German heritage is the perfect mixture of Frankish, Celtic, Roman, and Germanic roots, creating such a unique identity. However, while the West is like this, the East was built by another type of people, the Slavs. In the early medieval period, Slavic tribes started moving towards Eastern Germany. They also carried the R1a DNA, which is still common to Eastern Europeans. The very name of Berlin traces back to the Slavic roots, and they were some of the strongest people of that time. They blended together with older farmer and hunter-gatherer ancestries, and even made cuisines, dialects, and family structures in the East that still remain strong today. The Slavic culture was absorbed for a long time by Germany, and there are still many traces of it. But there were some other people who joined the hype bandwagon. Norse influence in northern Germany was quite an interesting landmark because there, the Norse pinned their destination. Traders, raiders, and settlers, these people carried the I1 genes, and interestingly enough, they had lots of mutations that have offered resistance to diseases. Needless to say, these were the toughest of the toughest people. When the Black Death or the bubonic plague hit centuries later, it is said that their genetic gift may have saved countless lives. Survivors of the coastal regions most likely owe their existence to a mutation that was carried out by the Viking blood. Culturally, the Norse were responsible for many traditions, surnames that are popular like Peterson and Hansen, and even coastal cities like Hamburg and Flensburg. In the early Germanic and Norse societies, warfare was quite an integral part of dominating the world. The whole concept of Einherjar, which basically means chosen warriors who died bravely in battle and were taken to Valhalla, was believed by the Norse people. The same spirit can be traced centuries later in the German military psyche. Soldiers, including the FLAK gunners, were manipulated into believing that their sacrificial role was that of heroes. This was quite like Norse warriors who faced impossible odds with stoic bravery. Another concept that the Nordic people garnered was Wotanism, which basically means a warrior spirituality that was centered around Odin, who was the god of war, wisdom, and sacrifice. This was more of a wise yet ruthless approach that was also found in German martial philosophy, making them quite a strong force to reckon with. In short, The Norse mythology and warrior tradition made Germany quite strong. From the old ages to World War II, the ancient ideals still remain in those people to this date. So what did we learn from these genetics? Regional variation. To sum it up, Germany today is quite a complex mix of DNA because on each end, you will find unique people with a little bit of changed looks. Firstly, the northern Germans are a perfect blend of hunter-gatherer, Yamnaya, and Norse ancestries that were further shaped by the Slavic migrations. Those people look really unique. The Eastern Germans, on the other hand, have strong Slavic genetics that was then input upon the older Neolithic farmer DNA. Slavs are very diverse, and they are also found in the eastern part of Europe. Then we have Western Germany, where a mix of Celtic, Roman, and Frankish influences made its debut long ago, particularly along the Rhine. Southern Germany has deep Celtic roots that mixed with the Roman settlers. This is why you see people who have dark hair and eyes in Bavaria's enduring traditions. Central Germany, also known as the heart of Europe, embodies all these cultures. These places have their own genetic stories too. Bonn is Celtic, while Cologne is Roman. Berlin is Slavic, and Hamburg is Norse. All of which shows us that every city in Germany is unique, with more than 10,000 years of DNA that has made them survive the tough times. Layered across them all are also Ashkenazi Jewish communities that have been present for over 1,000 years. They mixed up with the Europeans, adding another twist to the story. Maybe someone thousands of years ago will write this same exact script, adding newer variations to the German ancestry. What do you think about the hidden genes of Germany? Do they contain the most diverse DNA? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell icon for more. See you at the next one.